Hey guys, welcome to the channel. We are just over halfway through our 13 client month here in Wisconsin mainly. I'm in Minnesota right now, actually working my way up to a client. Had a break in the action here today, and got caught up on some phone calls, some emails, and shot some videos. And we are headed back into Wisconsin, working our way back through Wisconsin, and then back. We got an Illinois stop on the way back out on the way to the farm, and then we are jumping on a plane. I'm jumping on a plane and heading to Alabama. So we got a great client, a May client month here, if you will. And so that brings up to the point today. It's to me, it's something that I don't look forward to, because it's a bittersweet thing, right? We know that the clock is ticking, but when I'm on the road as much as I am, I've got a chore list, if you will, built, and I like to try to get that done. Honey-do list without the honey, right? And a chore list for myself that I like to do. Set that in a mindset, get myself focused for that, so when I'm home, I've got a good feeling and a good outlook on what I need to get done and how I need to go about doing that. If you are a past, present client, future client, what you'll see, if you haven't seen already, is when I build your habitat plans for you, I set those phases into effect so I can help you try to get there in a timely fashion, so you know that you're working towards the end goal, whether that takes you 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. At least you know you're heading in the right direction. It's a good feeling. What a good feeling is here is we are at or just beyond the halfway point. It's kind of scary. I know time flies, right? This year in Kentucky, we have a September 3rd opener. Last year it was the 4th. So if you're watching this, advances a couple weeks, obviously, into an October 1st opener. But we are nonetheless halfway through the calendar year, creeping up as far as the deer season goes, and we are creeping up on crunch time. So the question is, are you halfway there with your chore list? That's the first thing. We all have family lives. We all have lives outside of deer. I think I do. I don't really acknowledge that if it doesn't have anything to do with deer. No, I'm just kidding. But we all are busy, right? But it's always in the back of our mind. And I think what we need to do at this point is really be realistic. It can't be at the back of the mind anymore. It has to be at the forefront, guys, in order to get this stuff done and make a plan. If you're anything like me, I have to have that plan either written down in my mindset, thinking about it, going over it, strategizing it, so when I have the time to do it, like I said, we can get those done and be proficient. So we're going to touch on a few things today, guys, going over just that, trying to be proficient, right? Making sure what things to do, what things should be on your checklist. Number one thing I'd like to talk about today, guys, is the one thing that you need to focus on. Hopefully you did some post-season scouting right after the season ended and had a really good mindset of what the fall movement was if you're on a property that you're building. Now, if you're going to be hunting public ground, a new lease, something like that, where it's a fresh start, then after leaf out gets a little more tricky. It's not impossible. I like the month of April and May, because probably 50% or more of my clients, right, are in the North Country. Well, it's a little more enjoyable. We're not trudging through snow, and we are seeing, when I get there, we are seeing some of that maybe response to thermal cover, where you guys have a chance to get out there right after season and see some of that fall leftover sign. Highly recommend doing that. We've always been a big promoter of that on the channel. So something to keep in mind. Tying that with the checklist to your doe bedding. Where were them does wanting to be? If you're a client of mine and I've met you already, you know that I use that saying, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel, we are just trying to promote it. And that's something that we talk about pretty much on every client's trip that I'm on, guys, every client meeting. is if we're trying to find it. Now, we find it, and if there is a way, like when we're building transition or really emphasizing our corridors and through the bedding areas, wherever the case is, we are trying to find a way to make sure that is within the realm of what they are already doing. We're not going to take a farm and completely flip it on its head just for it to do what we want it to do. We're looking for big, dominant doe saturated trails that they're already there, they're already using it because of a food source within that first 100-yard rim, let's say, of a food source. It could be oaks, could be an oak flat, could be a food plot, could be ag, could be a bait pile. It's a food source. They're using it, and we want to enhance that. So how are we going about enhancing it? We're taking a survey. So on here it says mulching. The question is mulching. The question is hinge cutting, thermal cover. We have to investigate that. You should be in there digging into that, diving into that right now, really bringing that to the surface as far as what does it need? What is it lacking? I always joke, you need to feed the does caviar because that is your stick. That is your sticking power for the fall. That is your promotion to the farm. We have to treat them first. Notice, the one thing I don't have on the board is buck bedding. For that reason, don't be focusing on the buck bedding. You go internal, start blowing in pockets that don't attach to anything, don't make sense to anything, and the does are going to take it over anyway. You're not doing anything for the chance of to have any buck, let alone a mature buck, relate to it. You slot your does in, pay attention to your does now, focus on that checklist, if you will, and the bucks have a chance to relate to that somewhere closer. Those are things that you need to bring to the surface, guys, in those doe bedding areas. And once you find it, polish it, have it set on those food sources. And those food sources are number 4 here. We're going to touch on when we get there, but that has to start there. I highly recommend. One thing to focus on, guys, we're going to touch on is there's this huge myth, like you always hear me talk about, a habitat program, that if you don't get it done between January, February, and March, don't worry about it because you have to do it next year. It couldn't be further from the truth. So number 2, one thing we're going to touch on here is number 2, guys, as far as access trails. Make sure now is the time to get into those access trails, into the stand locations that you should have already had tweaked from last year, a mindset of where they're going, how you're getting, why that stand is there because of the doe bedding. Start with the doe bedding. You know which side of that doe bedding you need to be on. What side of the farm you need to be accessing into those because of how that doe bedding lays out away from you. You're not behind it. Hopefully, if you follow the channel at all, you know I'm not sitting directly behind that doe bedding area. We are hunting the movement of that cruising buck behind that. That's a separate video we're going to talk about here, guys. But that is a big deal. Don't put yourself behind it unless it's a spot where you know you get in and out of. But I'm usually hunting the movement of a cruising buck behind the doe bedding, not sticking ourselves behind the doe bedding, because usually 9 times out of 10, guys, if you are hunting directly behind the doe bedding, that means you are internal. You are blowing your scent internal. Very seldom do you find that you're behind doe bedding and that scent's going to the outside. So unless it's a side access situation on these narrow 20 and stuff like that, is a situation for it. But something to remember, you're hunting the cruising buck behind the doe bedding, not putting yourself behind the doe bedding most of the time. Attractions on the transition: licking branches, water holes. Great time right now to be focusing on them, guys. Get those stands hung, get the licking branches, get those licking branches created, hung, suspended. A couple videos back, you'll see I kind of went over on the process of which one to choose in your area as far as how you suspend those licking branches. Do some research on that, guys. Get those hung, open up the scrapes underneath it. When you're in there, you need to urinate. Make sure you're urinating in those scrapes. I wouldn't intentionally go in there in the fall to do it or get out of your tree stand to do it. But right now, if you're in there and you have, take advantage of that. Urinate in the scrapes, and then it puts that urea count in there, that smell, and I'm telling you, it works. Don't touch the licking branches. Don't touch them licking branches once they're hung. If you touch them, somebody else touches them in there. When you're showing them the setup, cut them down, start over. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's the importance you need to put on those. Don't touch that vine, that licking branch that you've hung of your choice. For that reason, guys, that's their information station. we don't need to interrupt it. The water hole side of it, guys, right now is a good time to be putting those in 110, 170, 150, 170 gallon tanks, whatever the area is and what you choose. Get those in the ground, make sure you're burying them just below the ground level. One, if not two critter sticks, one out each end. On that, something I'll touch about right now, guys, is something to remember, that for whatever reason, the deer like to drink out of the end of an oval shaped, a tank, the livestock tanks that we're using. Bury them in the ground at the surface, just below the surface, critter sticks in them. They like to drink out of the ends of those tanks. Not all the time, but I don't know what the percentage is, 75% of the time, 80% of the time they like to drink out of them. Position the tanks so it's stand, and that's actually perpendicular. A lot of times ends up being perpendicular to your stand, your shot, so they're drinking out of the ends of the tank, which places them broadside. Something to keep in mind. Number 5, guys, is something we all wait for. It's this time of the year to start thinking food plots. Now, I'm not talking summer food plots, I'm talking about a food plots program in general. Your fall food plot program starts now. If you're creeping up kind of in the Midwest up north, it should be a mindset of what you're going to be planning come Memorial Day, before Memorial Day, right about that time period. If you're in the Midwest, then it's just before. If you're down where the farm is right now in Kentucky, should be planning, right? I mean, we're getting up on that time, that soil conditions hitting that 60, 68 degree, morning temperatures, and we are good to go to start. I've got so many clients in Kentucky that are already putting seed in the ground. I will be doing that when I get home around the 21st of the month here, this month. A little behind week maybe or something, but plenty of time. Why are we doing that now? We are doing that to set the stage. We are planting a cover seed so we have that plot, that fall plot protection. It has nothing to do with summer food. A lot of the summer food, but it has some summer food in it. If you're using the green cover seeds summer release program that I am highly recommending right now, guys, for years I've looked at this and tried this and tried to build off from a program like that, and that program right now is pretty darn close to being perfect, if you ask me. And there's not too many people on the client list this year that aren't going to get recommended that, and it's kind of always something we got to watch, and kind of a hard touchy point there if people are used to tilling. But I recommend planting that for you're not going to kill the clover when you crimp it down in the fall, but you plant sometime here in the spring. That runs all summer long, summer release, hence the word summer release, and it's doing great things for you guys, and it's building a huge amount of biomass. And when we get to the first week, second week of August, wherever you're at in the country tuning in, broadcasting those brassicas right into that standing crop, and we have something to crimp down on top of those roller crimp, color pack and spray, whatever your choice is of terminating that on top of them fall brassicas, guys, and we are protecting our fall investment. Something to keep in mind, if you're planting straight buckwheat on subpar soil to begin with, buckwheat draws moisture. Buckwheat, it's a proven fact that buckwheat is a very, very high moisture content plant. So where's it getting the moisture? It's sucking it out of the ground, right? That's why it rots, and that's why it's such a good cover crop when you crimp it and terminate it, because it rots, and that helps that green manure release. Problem with it is it's sucking the moisture out of your ground. So you want the mix, you want the blend, you want the buckwheat in there. Yes, it has to be something you're using, not a straight blend. And there's folks out there, guys out there promoting straight blends, and that's fine. My 2 cents is the stuff that I've found, guys, that works is this: not the straight buckwheat. Put it in a blend, because if they eat you out of house and home, and they start eating it, and it's a dry year, you're going to have something left in that summer release. They're not going to eat the sorghum and the sunflower and the buckwheat and the berseem clover, and the list goes on and on and on. Some of the beans that are in there, stuff like that. Not going to eat it all away. And what happens is, guys, you have a chance to have something to crimp down on top of your fall brassicas to protect your fall brassicas going into fall, so it doesn't dry out. If you hit it just right or hit it just wrong, whichever way you want to look at that, and we go into kind of a drought deal, and all of a sudden we have a exposed soil situation, or a dried out soil situation going into fall. Your fall food plots are going to fail. It's a protection plan, guys, and it starts now. It does not start in August. Kind of a chore list, if you will, something to keep in mind, some stuff to build on, stuff to put on the refrigerator door, if you will, and start checking that stuff off. Thanks, guys.